We've got a young producer who does a great job, Tommy Bachelet, but it drives him crazy. Like when we've got a couple of segments that aren't filled on the board when the show starts, he's like, "Oh, what come on, we got to." We're like, "Mate, don't worry about it." And sometimes the red light will go on, and then we've got to come up with something, and someone will just say something, and then away we go. Yeah. So it's just, and that's what we love about it. I honestly, genuinely feel very lucky that I go to work each day, and I can't wait to get in there because we just have such a great time.
Good. Welcome to another episode of Going Pro, and what a pleasure it is having Australian cricket legend on our podcast. So 46 tests for Australia, 32 one-day internationals, 232 first-class professional matches, currently have the highest rating radio show and host the Drive Home Rush Hour Triple M show with Bernie and Jars, big-time family man. And one would say you've done many things at the highest level. So to kick things off today, I know you love your golf. Would you have done it all differently if it could have meant that you would have got a green jacket at Augusta?
Oh, sheepers. The tough question right off the bat. Firstly, thanks for having me. Probably not. I love my cricket at the time, and still do. Probably don't love the game as much as I did when I played it. Having said that, I've still got a big involvement in the game through my work. But would I have changed anything? No way. As I said, I sort of grew up playing multiple sports, and I was okay at most of them. But I think cricket found me more than anything. It wasn't sort of anyone's real push that I should go down that track. I think, as I said, I think cricket found me, and I only really got stuck into golf post cricket, so I don't know whether I would have been any good anyway, so who knows.
When you say cricket found you, what do you mean by that? Was there a certain age or just pathway that kind of naturally emerged for you pretty early on?
Yeah, pretty much. Look, I grew up in the Barossa Valley. I was firstly born in Adelaide, but then had a stint, lived for about 4 or 5 years in the Barossa, and it was a real sort of, we lived in the town of Angaston, but it was a real country sort of feel to growing up. Like lots of my friends at primary school had farms, and then the Angaston Oval was like a second home to our family. Mum played tennis and netball, same with my sister. My dad was very sport focused, so he'd finished his career, but he was still, wanting to play cricket and umpire footy and coach and all that sort of stuff. And I just grew up around sport. So, whether it was basketball, little athletics, tennis, cricket, football, golf, I just did it all. And then probably wasn't until I sort of got towards the end of schooling, it was probably became more about cricket and football. And then I just found myself loving cricket more than footy, really. And that's not to say that I would have made it as a footballer, because I would have had to have done a lot of stuff physically to make it in football. But I was probably naturally better at cricket, and ended up sort of going through the pathway here in South Australia with the state teams, and really just went all the way through the system until I played for Australia. So that's pretty much how it worked out.
What was that like? Was it in the early 90s where that started unfolding? What was the pathway like to get towards that, I guess, like state level, Redbacks level? What was the training like? What was the culture around cricket in that time growing up?
Yeah, so I finished school in 1988. Before I finished, I was sort of so I went, under 15s, under 17s, under 19 state teams with South Australia. And then I think the real turning curve for me was in my last year of the state under 19 carnival. I made the Australian under 19 team and ended up touring. It was a fluke because we toured England. Other times, you go to different countries, but my goal was always to play cricket in England. And I sort of grew up watching the Ashes. So then, to have our own little mini Ashes, Australian under-19 team play England in England was just brilliant. And went through that team with some players that went on to play for Australia, like Damien Martin, Michael Kastovich and Adam Gilchrist. So getting exposed to players that were really good at that age was great for me, and that was a huge learning curve. And then, so the state underage teams into the Australian under-19 team came back, did really well on that tour, came back, and I thought, I'm actually probably good enough to give cricket a real crack. And then after I got back from that tour, I think I got 100 in the first grade game here and got selected for South Australia. So it came a little bit quicker than I thought. And then that was the start of my professional journey.
Wow. Did you know that you were like coming hard and actually really getting towards that level going into that trip? Or were you just kind of like going through the motions? When did you start to realize, hang on a minute, like that's actually, this is actually a career pathway for me? And then the second question to that is, when you were over there, how did you actually do well? Were you feeling the pressure like, oh my God, I got this opportunity, I really need a strike here? Or how did you actually still lock into that experience and then do well?
Yeah, it's level? Interesting. Talking to guys like you have made me sort of realize, from a young age, what was I thinking? And I was never really that ambitious. Like, I just love sport. Like, as I said, I played all sports, and if I wasn't playing sport, I was on my bike, or I was doing, trying to catch yabbies in the creek. I was just, trying to do stuff all the time. And it probably wasn't until that tour where I thought, and I was around these kids that had been great juniors for 2 or 3 years, and then being around them and comparing my game to them and taking my game to another level is when the penny dropped that, okay, I can be as good as these guys. And that was a bit of belief as well. Probably coming from South Australia and playing against sides like Queensland juniors they'd always bully us. Like they'd eaten 5 chooks each week. They were just full of protein, those guys, and they were bigger than us. And then New South Wales and Victoria, because of the population, they were always better than us. So we'd go to these state carnivals and sort of get beat up a little bit. And I was always like, oh, well, I'm okay, but I'm never going to be as good as these guys. But it was probably that tour, just being around them. And then in terms of pressure, I just set myself at that tour to, one, to be part of a team and try and beat England, but also just try and be as good as these guys. And then once I had I think it's like any sport, you have a little bit of success early on. And early on in that tour, I did okay. And then I got, just grew some self-belief. And I think in the end, I scored more runs than anyone else on that tour. And from then on, and Damien Martin, who was just an unbelievable player. From then I thought, right, I'm as good as these guys, and I'm going to try and, keep on that trajectory.
It can be kind of hard achieving success early on. Like I look at Emma Raducanu, for example, like at such a young age, won US Open, and now she's really struggling and finding her way through injuries and battling the pressure when she has been on tour, and she's basically lost her ranking and everyone's forgotten about her in just the blink of an eye. From that success, how did you actually then manage that to go, well, how do I keep this going and then keep my spot and just keep things moving so I can actually have like a spot in the Australian team?
Well, that was just the start for me, really. I mean, doing well on the Australian under-19 tour was like a little stepping stone to the next thing that I wanted to achieve, which was to get into the South Australian men's cricket team. So I came back from that tour, and that happened a lot quicker than I thought as well. And then, again, daunting playing with some of my heroes in the South Australian cricket team. But again, I just found a way that I did reasonably well when I first started. And then the Australian cricket team came along quicker than I thought as well. So getting into the Australian cricket team at the age of 23, I think, was still quite young. Ricky Ponting was younger than me, but I still... back then, I think probably the average age would have been maybe 25, 26. And I don't know, I just sort of got to a stage where I thought I just didn't want to put a cap on it. I just wanted to keep sort of getting better. And that became sort of my mantra. Why not? Yeah, why not me? Because I'd never really thought that until probably a later sort of age. Mm-hmm. And then through training and that, I just wanted to get better every day. I'd go to bed at night going, right, how am I going to, what's my focus tomorrow? So that's pretty much how it turned out.
Yeah, it's interesting. The upbringing you had, I reckon, maybe made it easier for you because you didn't put so much pressure. You did all these other things and you weren't even thinking about trying to make a career out of it. You were just enjoying it. And then it got to a point where it was like, all right, let's now take this next level. You had so much energy to put into it because you hadn't gone through that whole full-on journey like maybe some of these other players had been to get to the point where they were at right there.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't put any pressure on myself. I mean, even making the under 15, under 17, under 19 teams, it just happened. Like I wasn't, at a certain age where I was going, right, I've got to get into these teams, and it just, just evolved. And then, so you're right. Like when I got into those sides, that was just the start for me. It wasn't I think sometimes, especially at junior level, their goal is to get into the state under 19 team, and then once they do that, that's it. Yeah, and they've reached their goal before they've even gone away and played in the carnival. They've done it. That was their goal. So yeah, that's sort of how it worked out for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Today's podcast sponsor is Electric Road Agency, who were formerly 4RT. Now, if you want a team of strategists, designers, producers, creators who drive stories to tell your advertising and marketing needs, these guys are the best in the business. They've been extremely influential for us at ATA. They've driven our media game forward to new levels that we never knew that were possible. And they've done it with countless brands, big, small, it doesn't matter what the size, they just love telling your story. So they specialize in health, wellness, fitness, tourism, construction, and they are just the best in the business in creating adaptive solutions to find how to tell your brand or how to discover your brand and tell that story. So highly, highly, highly recommend these guys. And if you want to get in touch, please go on electricroad.au or search the Instagram handle Electric Road Agency, and they will answer your email, your call, your DM, and they'll be in touch and they'll be able to tell your story very well. In that point, were you always a batter? Were you bowling as well? Were you trying to figure out where your spot was, your best preferred spot?
Well, I was always a batter, but I love my bowling as well. And Dad, having played the game, sort of realised that there was a lot of back injuries in fast bowling, or trying to bowl fast. And so he held me back a fair bit. So through my schooling years, I bowled off spin, and it used to frustrate the shit out of me because I had this mentality of, I'm a fairly confrontational sort of guy. Like if someone gets in my face, I've got to go back. So for an off spinner to, bowl one down and hit me over my head, all I want to do was run in and bowl a bouncer, and sledge him. So it wasn't until probably towards the end of school where I started sort of bowling a bit of medium pace in the nets again and trying to get my skills back up. And then once I got a bit more strength and realised that, I ended up having a few stress fractures later on, but I was sort of always more of a batter. But because I think, as I said, I've played a lot of other sports, I just wanted to be involved in the game all the time. So I wanted to be a good fielder, and I wanted to bowl as well and chip him for the team in that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What started to happen when you played for Australia? How were those early experiences, your first few tests? Do you recall what it was like? What was it like putting on the baggy green and playing for Australia?
Yeah, very daunting again. I did well in my first test match, and I remember everyone saying, "Oh, you look so calm," but I can tell you it was the complete opposite. I was absolutely crapping myself. I think like a lot of people doing something out of their comfort zone for the first time, there's obviously a lot of anxiety and nerves around that. So the best thing, Luke, about that first game was that I'd never been in better form. Like I was just in great touch. So I had full confidence in the fact that if I could sort of handle the nerves, and as they say in cricket, you get through the first sort of 10 deliveries, 20 deliveries, and then start to feel yourself, then I thought I'd be okay. And that's exactly what happened. Sort of, I got through, got a few runs on the board, and then all of a sudden, playing for Australia was huge, but I was just playing another game of cricket. And I think one thing I was good at was actually putting everything out of my mind, crowd, television, pressure. For me, it really just came down to I'm the batter, he's the bowler. that's all I was doing. I was, my job was to score runs, and it was a one-on-one contest between me and the bowler, and that's how it turned out.
Yeah, I think in tennis and cricket, cricket in a batting format, that is crucial. Is that maybe times when you haven't been in form, where you've maybe lost touch with that? Or what would you put down maybe periods where you weren't in form? Like I look at an example with David Warner, where like he's gone through periods where he's just struggled and getting out under 10 all the time, ducks. It's like what are the mind games, and what happens in the mind in terms of cricket and batting?
Yeah, no, I went through a lot of lows as well. Like, so I was out of form. I think the main thing you think about, I reckon, is before the next time you play or your next innings, you probably start thinking about the outcome before it obviously happens. So you start thinking, well, what if I don't get 50 or don't get 100? What if I make another low score? You're like, what are the outcomes of that? And I think that's where all the negativity comes from, because how's your life going to change? How are you going to get back into the team? And that was my main thing. And I think if I look back in my career now, we had sports psychologists around, but I don't reckon we had good ones, to be honest. And I look at the resources that the players have got now, and I'm just so jealous. Not so much about the training and that, but the mental side of the game is huge. So yeah, by the times that I was out of form, I sort of probably went away from just watching the ball and reacting, but walking out to bat having those negative feelings about, oh, what if I fail? And that was obviously the worst thing that you can do, really.
Yeah. Knowing what you know now, how would you go about it and look at it from maybe a different perspective, or go from a different mental approach to actually perform better?
Yeah, well, I think the more you're exposed to the mental side of the game, I think you can come up with better techniques in managing pressure. And that's not nerves, it's more the anxiety around those thoughts that I just expressed. So I think I would have come up with better techniques in dealing with that. Also, I probably learnt as my career went on, the worse I was playing, the more I wanted to train, the more balls I wanted to hit, whereas I realised I was actually better off like having a break. And that doesn't mean going away, because you can't often go away for a week and just totally refresh, but you can certainly have a session off here and there. And I was the other way. I just grinded it out, and I just wanted to try and get those feelings back. So I'm sure that's the same in tennis, but I would have tried to work out better ways that I could really freshen up mentally.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, just being able to decompress. Like after matches, relax, find that zone where you can just chill out, get your nervous system and just body feeling like it's in a more relaxed state, rather than go into that like, nah, I'm going to grind, I'm going to really smash this out, I need to get back in the nets, which there is value in that. But I think at a certain level, at your level particular, then it's like, you're good. You have the skills. It's why do I need to get back in the nets and do all this extra work? I maybe just need to bring it back a bit and relax. Did you have anyone to kind of tell you that, or any mentors or people around you to kind of help you and guide you in that way?
Not really. Like I did have people that I did trust, but that was only my own fault, really. Like a couple of my best mates always tell me how, pig-headed I was, and, whenever I used to get advice, I used to sort of find it or take it as a bit of an insult. So that was just part of my mentality. And but I do regret not having, one person that I could always go to and just be open and honest about how I was feeling, whether that was mentally or how my game was at the time. So no, I really just tried to work it out myself along the way. And I feel like I could have played better cricket if I had, as I say, like the better ways I could have sort of dealt with things mentally, but also having maybe one constant in my life, whether it was a coach or just a mate outside of the game that I could have been a bit more open and honest with.
Sure. I mean, we can always look back and go like, should have, could have, would have.
Yeah.
But do you look back on your career anyway and go like, wow, like I could have done more? Or do you think about it? Do you feel really content looking back on your cricket days playing for Australia? Happy with where it was and all of that?
Not really. No, I feel like I could have played a lot more test matches. I really do, and played better, because I know my best was good enough as, firstly, as an international cricketer, but looking at some of the players that I played with, I knew that when I was playing well, I was just as good as them, and they turned into greats to the Australian cricket team. So, I think my main thing was more the mental side of the game. Like as I said, I touched on it I did have a lot of anxiety around failure, and I think that sort of hurt my career, because I knew, after a while, our team was so good that they were, the media and other people were sort of always looking at any little weak links in the team. So you knew that if you failed 2 or 3 times in a row, they were coming for you. So in the end, that sort of probably got to me a little bit.
Yeah. Blessing and a curse, because having so many good people around you drives your standard up, but then also makes it so much more competitive and hard to keep your spot. Yeah, it would have been brutal at the time. Do you think, I appreciate, first of all, you saying that you actually are not happy with you could have done so much better, and I appreciate the honesty. Does that drive you with what you do now? Looking back, to have a bit more I still have something left and I really want to keep improving in whatever you're doing now and your career path now?
I think I've always been one of those people, whether it's, each day or whether it's in the media, I always reflect on a show or a particular segment I did, or a day's work that I did. So I always reflect and go, that could have been better, or no, I'm reasonably happy with that. But look ahead to tomorrow and think, right, okay, I'm going to do that better. So I'm not saying that I want to be the best commentator that I possibly can be, but I don't need people to tell me that. I don't want to be, I don't have to be the next Richie Beno or whatever. I'm pretty content in myself. But I'm also now at a point in my life where I'm 52 at the end of the year, and I really just want to have a good life balance. I've got 3 kids, a daughter who's 22 living in Sydney, and 2 boys, 7 and 8. So my main priority is my family now. So it's being able to probably be a little bit less selfish, because, a professional sports person's a lot of the time's got to be very selfish in terms of, day-to-day activities. Whereas for me now, it's more about sort of, making sure my family's happy. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, spot on. And we're definitely going to go and talk more about that. I do appreciate as well you talking about just your honest reflection each day to try to do things better, not because you want to be known or people to see you in that way. It's more just for yourself. And I think a lot of people can take heaps away from that. Because I feel like that's how long-term you actually keep building towards something, is every day just keep reflecting on what was good, what could I have done better, how did I handle that conversation with someone, did I leave that in the right place? Because I think that's how you can actually get into a lot of trouble if you don't honestly have a look at how you're interacting in your day and how you could be better in some ways.
Yeah, and also I think a lot of people are very critical of themselves. So there's no doubt that at different stages through everyone's day that, you can reflect back and think, I could have done that better. Or as you said, even if it's just a conversation that you've had with someone. But I think it's important too to give yourself a pat on the back every now and then too, being able to, the work environment I've got now at Triple M is just unbelievable. We're best of mates, and we're able to sort of reflect that in our conversations as well. We can say, that was shit house, or mate, we nailed that, So I think, if anything, I think a lot of people are probably overcritical of themselves, whereas sometimes I think you've got to, in your reflection, you can give yourself a bit of a pat on the back every now and then. Yeah,
for sure. Going back to playing for Australia, you played with some absolute legends. Steve Waugh, Shane Warne, Ricky Ponting, you spoke about before. What was it like, and what stood out? And do you have any stories hanging around with these guys? And what do you really remember being around some of these absolute greats that are still the greatest to this day?
Yeah, well, throw Glenn McGrath in there, Jason Gillespie, You mentioned the Wars, Mark Taylor, Michael Slater. They're all David Boone. They're all great players. I think the thing I take out of most of that is, and I reflect on people that are sort of making out or trying to make a career in sport, is to keep trying to tell them that the great players that I played with, they all failed as well a lot of times. They weren't always brilliant day to day, but more often than not they were. But there were times in games where, the games were on the line and they'd always want the ball, or they would always want to hit the winning runs. Darren Lehman's a classic example of that as well. They always wanted to be the person in the team that got their team over the line, and they didn't put the failures down to not wanting to put themselves in those situations again. And I talk to a lot of golfers that are trying to make it as well, and sometimes I reckon I get the feeling that they don't necessarily like being in the heat of the battle when the tournament's there to be won, or if they've had a bad experience with trying to win a tournament, that it's reflected on them badly. Whereas, guys like Glenn McGrath and Shane Warne, they didn't always win the game for us, but that didn't stop them always wanting to be in the main people and wanting to win the game in the future. So, yeah, try and don't let the disappointment affect you too much, and always want to be under pressure, because that's ultimately, if you're going to be a professional sports person, then you're going to have to deal with pressure at certain stages.
Yeah, spot on. I mean, it speaks to Steph Curry, who you've used the example before, but like if he misses 3 shots in a row, he wants the ball. And if he misses again, he wants the ball. It's like the next one's most definitely going in.
And the thing I love, sorry to cut you off, is, the great tennis players, and I don't know anywhere near as much about tennis as you guys, but I felt like the difference between the greats is when the game's on the line, they tended to go harder and they weren't worried about making the mistakes, whereas the more average players probably played more within themselves on those key moments and just tried to stay in the points, whereas the better players tried to take their game to another level when they needed to.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you got a team that you had and everybody does that, you guys would have been so hard to beat just from that alone. You take the skills away from it, but just like that alone, when there is the challenge and everyone embraces the challenge and embraces that opportunity to actually, no, I want to win the game here. No, I want to hit the winning runs, and everyone's on board in that way. It would have created a really like electrifying environment to be part of, that you would have just had so much growth to be involved with.
Yeah. And I look at, those tennis players I was talking about, Federer, Djokovic, Nadal, they weren't waiting for the opponent to make a mistake. Same with Tiger Woods, watching him play golf. Like, he was trying to win the tournament himself. He wasn't waiting for someone else to make a mistake. So they're the main differences for me.
What do you put that down to? In a practical way, what gives these guys, people you played with, tennis, spoke about the greats, and Tiger Woods, where is this coming from, and what do they have, or how do they get into that zone that makes them feel like, nah, this is mine and I'm taking this opportunity?
I don't think that the fear of the outcome, I think they're not worried about that. Like, they've got so much belief in their game that they just feel like they're going to take it upon themselves to actually get it done. And they're not worried about, if I miss a shot, that it's going to cost me. I just don't think they've got that in their head. They're not worried about losing the game. And if they do, well, they do. Yeah. And then they're just going to move on very quickly.
Definitely being very quick to move on. Do you have any memories or really key moments that stand out for you in certain tests or certain one-day internationals, or with the guys that you played with?
Oh, I just remember some of the tours. There's some great moments along the way, but my first tour was Ricky Ponting's first tour as well. It was in 95. So I'd played a couple of test matches here in Australia to finish off the summer, and then we had a quick tour of New Zealand to play some one-day cricket, and then we went to the West Indies, and we beat the West Indies in the West Indies I think it was the first time they'd lost a series for 20 years or something like that in their home country. And that was the real sort of turning point. They were always the number one team, and then that was the beginning of a good era or a great era for Australian cricket. So that was a standout sort of moment for me. And then the 97 Ashes tour, because I'd sort of been to England as a younger, I think I was 17, 18, something like that. And I'd gone over to play some league cricket, and I went to one of the Ashes test matches, and I just remember being at the ground and the atmosphere, and Damien Martin was in that team who I'd played under 19s with. And so, I must have been a bit older. I must have been about 20. And that was another light bulb moment for me. It was just like, that's when I started to have real ambition. As I spoke about earlier, how I'd sort of said, if I play for Australia, I'll play for Australia. But I remember watching those boys at it, and I thought, I've got to get myself back here to an Ashes tour. So I was lucky to be able to achieve that in 97. And but I think the great moments were just some of the great victories and playing with the great champions. We've mentioned a few of their names, and I think the celebrations, whether we won, lost, or drew, we knew we'd given it all for those 5 days, and we made sure that we'd sort of enjoy each other's company for day 5, and certainly if we won, we celebrated pretty hard. So those are some of the great memories.
Mm-hmm. You made a double 100. What was that like? Was it over a couple of days, I'm guessing?
Over a day and a bit, I think. That was. So I'd batted all day with Steve Waugh, and that was one of the highlights as well, was being able to be in a big partnership with Steve. And I think one of the things that I was okay at as well was, I think it got drilled into me quite young that if I ever made 100, the easiest runs you were going to make were after you'd reached 100. So, I mean, cricket is so, with statistical moments in games, to get 100 is quite special. So a lot of people, put themselves under a lot of pressure to get 100. And then once they get 100, they think that's enough. They've done it. Whereas I sort of enjoyed batting for long periods of time. So, we just had one of those moments in South Africa where it was the first test match of the series, and the first test is always the most important to sort of, establish yourself into the series. And they were a good team, South Africa. So while we were going well and we had them where we wanted to, we just wanted to grind them into the ground. So I remember a lot of conversations with Steve along the way where he probably thought I might have been losing a little bit of focus. You go, come on, no, we've got these guys by the balls. Let's just keep going. So it was just a great day's cricket.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it like that. The partnership involved when you're in a bit of a group with your batting, like how do you stay in the zone and you feed off your partner, and then also maybe get like tactical in a way where you start batting in a certain way based on how they're setting up the field and how someone's bowling at you.
Yeah, it depends on who you're playing with. And that's where, getting to know each of your teammates really well, you work out what they need at the time. A lot of time in between overs, I actually didn't like to talk too many tactics. I'd be sort of having just a general chat to try and sort of either calm me down or calm my other mate down the other end. So, but there's other times during the game where, you're going through a really crucial period. So you might be making little goals. All right, mate, I'll see you in 6 balls time, especially if you're sort of going through a bit of a survival patch in the game. There's ebbs and flows. I mean, the game goes for so long that you're always going to have little moments in the game where things are going well, and at other times you've got to find ways that you got to get yourself through little spurts. So it's probably good in cricket you've got someone to talk to at the end of each 6 deliveries that you can sort of reassess things.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I think there's parallels to tennis matches, because especially in the longer tennis matches that you play where there is momentum shifts and gear changes where you might really push for a certain part of the game, and then you might be kind of like just really holding serve, and then just someone else is serving well and it's hard to break, and then maybe at like 4-all you really make a push, and then you can get a set 6-4, and then someone else raises their level and you have to go with them. What sort of zone were you liking? What sort of zone did you like to be in as a batter? And how did you actually maintain focus? What helped you stay in that zone so you actually could be performing at that length that you were batting for? Yeah,
I think as a batter, when you're you're in a good zone, and I reckon that's the difference between an average player and a great player as well. Like they're able to get themselves to a zone a little bit quicker than other players. It's a combination of trying to get yourself through that start of an innings and then managing your nerves. I don't care who you are, whether it's Brian Lara, Ricky Ponting, whoever. Everyone's nervous when they first walk out. That's when you're most vulnerable. But once you get through that little stage, it's then about your opposition, your field placements, and then getting yourself into the natural flow of the game. And then I think, a bit like a tennis player, there's not many innings where it goes 100% according to plan. There's always going to be little situations throughout that innings where you might have to throttle it back. There might be times to attack. There might be times to take more of a risk to try and alleviate some of the issues you're having at the time. So you're always having these you're just trying to sum it up as you go along. But I reckon the best times, you're batting, or the moments that I had was when I used to walk off and you sort of, it was just all reactionary. It was just all flowing. And that doesn't happen that many times, but it's just, you're not thinking about technique. The ball's bowled to you and you react, and the training that you've done reflects in that, and the game flows for you. It's just a beautiful natural flow.
Yeah, when you're in that instinctual zone. And
I'm sure tennis players are exactly the same.
No, I have a handful of matches that I can recollect where I walk off and almost I'm disorientated because I was in like a trance zone.
Yeah. And there's also in cricket where the great slippers often can't remember catching the ball, which is weird, but all of a sudden they've got the ball in their hand, and because they've caught so much at practice, it's just become so natural. The nick's taken, and then the ball comes and they take it naturally, but they can't necessarily remember catching the ball because it happens so quickly, but they're just sort of in a zone.
Mm. Did you have like a routine in terms of like the bowler was coming in? Did you do something with your eyes? Was there like a routine on how you got yourself focused to then be ready for that ball that's coming at you, at like 150 k's an hour sometimes, or like a really good spinner? How did you actually mentally get yourself focused for each delivery that you faced?
Yeah, so I liked sort of, so as soon as I faced a delivery, I'd sort of instantly reflect on how I played it, what it did off the pitch, how quick it was, how much spin there was, whatever it was, or, could I have played it a little bit better? Once I'd reflected on that, I'd sort of switch off again, have a look around the crowd, the field, or sort of not worry about, what was going to come next. But my big thing is that I always wanted to be ready before the bowler was turning around to bowl. I never wanted to be rushed, so I always wanted to control my own rhythm. So apart from that, I'd sort of go into my stance the same way, just sort of try and keep a bit of a rhythm going with the way, I went about things. But the main thing for me was trying to control the rhythm of the natural rhythm in between deliveries and trying to mentally switch on and off.
That's really interesting. Is that something that's taught? Like, does everyone have like their own routine? Because in tennis, there's like serve routines, return routines, and how you actually return serve, and the same routine that you go into with your serve, for example.
Yeah, it's taught in cricket. Yep. Often we say that routines, very important, just to sort of being able to sort of, control how you feel comfortable about the way you go about things. Same with preparation, I reckon. Like a lot of people or a lot of players want to get into a certain sort of routine about how they prepare, whether it's, dietary or the way they train. So I sort of consider that routine as well. But some players are probably less routine orientated, and that might just be something to do with their personality. But for me, I just sort of like to, take my guard, go down at a certain period of time, and then just concentrate on sort of watching the cues of the bowler as they're coming in. And then as soon as they sort of load up, I was just sort of trying to watch that ball as closely as possible.
Yeah, super interesting. From there though, did you already have a bit of a plan moving out of cricket? Because I know it's actually really tough for a professional athlete sometimes to actually know what's next, and they do really well in their career, but they don't really have a pathway or give much thought into what's next, and then they can maybe mentally go into a bit of a hole after having such a great career, for example? Is this something that you were thinking about? How did you then set things up to then transition out of cricket?
Yeah, I started towards the end of my career, I was sort of starting to think about, possible scenarios. I didn't really have laser focus on one particular thing. In the end, I think the media again found me a little bit. The end of my career happened quicker than I thought it was going to, because I got asked to retire. So I had.
What do you mean?
They were going to sack me unless I retired, pretty much. So
wow,
it looked better if I retired. I still had 2 years left on a contract. So I was absolutely devastated. Like I knew that I could have kept playing at a really good level. It sort of came at a time of my marriage breakdown, and I didn't have a great year. And then because I was a certain age, one of the selectors or the head selector thought it was, he's just starting to, naturally taper off. And I was so angry and knew and at the time we hadn't had a lot of success. So, they were trying to rebuild the squad. So the senior players were going to be the first players to go. So I'd got offered some media work while I was playing over in England, which I took up and was okay with it. And then when I came back to Australia, I was offered some work with Fox Sports back here. And so then once my cricket career ended, I sort of started channeling that, and then it sort of just grew from there, really. So I wasn't that keen on coaching. I'd sort of probably prefer to go into the media. I wasn't overly business orientated. I was in a pretty good spot financially. So I didn't really have to rush into anything, but in the end, got an opportunity in the media and loved it, and it's just continued down that track.
Yeah. Did you find that really tough after that period where you felt like you could have gone on, but then you were asked to leave the squad, knowing that like a lot of it was maybe to do with just what was going on in your personal life, and it wasn't necessarily to do with that you were getting too old and then you couldn't just play how you used to play, and maybe the selectors or people around you not understanding it from that point of view, or not having that connection with you to understand that like it's just something that's going on in your life and that you still got a lot to give. Like, were you having these sort of conversations, or was it basically all one way? Nah, we're not hearing it. This is the decision.
Yeah, I was absolutely shattered. Because I sort of wanted to leave the game in a certain way, and I 100% knew that I was, good enough to keep playing for another 3 years probably at the time. So, I was having these conversations, but they were just not going on. They'd made their mind up, and I actually had a conversation with the head selector, and he said, doesn't matter how many runs you make, you're not getting yourself back into the side. So that was like, right, okay, start to look ahead. And but I really made a conscious decision, having seen other people come out of the game as well, really bitter, that I didn't want to be one of those people. So I'm still reasonably bitter with the person that, I haven't got an enemy in the world, but I'm pretty bitter with this person who made these decisions. But in terms of the organisation, I didn't want to be bitter with them, because I've had, some of the best times of my life there.
Mm. You talk a little bit about the financial position that you're in. What is the financial world of cricket like? We know what it's like at the top of tennis. We've speaking about it at a lower level at tennis, and how the money is really, it's brutal. You can't make a career out of it unless you're in the top 100. So what is the financial setup of cricket? Can you make money, and good money, at a first class level? Where can you actually almost have like a full career from playing?
Yeah, it's probably like a lot of other sports. It's changed a lot in probably the last 20, 30 years. I was actually really fortunate. So there was no Players Association around when I first started playing professional cricket. But when I started playing Test cricket, actually my second Test match, we all voted, because we were trying to form a Players Association, and Cricket Australia were having nothing to do with it. So it got to the point where we voted that we were going to sit out the last test match of the summer, which was my second test, if that was going to be the case. Fortunately, they then said, yep, okay, well, we'll acknowledge your Players Association. And then from there, things just took off. Like, we were able to negotiate certain rates. And so our pays went up quite quickly. So that was at the start of my Australian career. And they've just kept going up ever since. So I think, it's certainly not as brutal as the individual sports. There's reasonable. The Australian international players, especially countries like Australia, England, they make very good money. You can make a decent money if you're playing for South Australia, and then other than that, it obviously drops away pretty quickly. So I don't know how many. There's probably about 20 to 25 on a list with South Australia. So the rookie contracts have come up a fair bit. So if you're that level, you can sort of start to earn reasonable money. If other than that, you're not making any money at all, really. But the next step is to get into the Australian cricket team, and you're earning, great money.
Yeah. It seems, like a obvious pathway there from state level. But it's also good that at a state level that you can still make really good money playing the Sheffield Shield competition and all those competitions, right, against all the other states. Yeah,
that's right. And when I first started, you couldn't earn a living, playing for South Australia, really. So now, there's Big Bash contracts, and then there's your state contracts as well. So if you're an average state player, you're earning, reasonable money. You might be, earning maybe a couple $100,000 maybe. So not too bad as a youngster.
Average, just an average state player is getting a couple $100,000.
I reckon, if you're playing Big Bash cricket as well, the top Big Bash contracts now are, excuse me, I got a bit of a thing in my throat. I reckon you're earning maybe a couple $100,000 for a good Big Bash contract now, and then if you're an average state player, you're probably another 150 on top of that, I reckon.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, Big Bash and 2020's changed the game. You need some more water, by the way.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, hold up. We got a jug here.
Just got one of those.
Yeah.
Those dry.
I had that in a podcast recently. It's
Oh, little Rory's got a cough as well. We've both got the same thing. It's just sort of.
I was just saying. I mean, the Big Bash in 2020 has changed the game. That it's made it way more accessible for guys to actually earn a living, and it maybe even funnel and just focus on 2020. Like, how has that completely changed the game?
Yeah, well, I think it's good in one way because there's a great rivalry with the AFL. So AFL and cricket, around the talent, there's no doubt that a lot of kids grow up, especially males, grow up playing cricket and football, and then they sort of get to a stage, right, what am I going to choose? And I think probably most see the AFL is probably more of a career path because you can earn, there's 40, 45 people on a list with each. So I reckon each weekend there's almost 1,000 AFL footballers playing. Whereas you compare that to cricket, it's a lot less. But having said that, I think because of the money's definitely gone up. There's more because of T20 cricket. If you're not good enough maybe to play either first class cricket or for Australia, then at least there's avenues around T20 cricket where you can be a real role player for that team or franchise and then maybe still earn a reasonable living out of doing it that way. So I think there's definitely more choice for cricketers. There's better ways that you can make a living out of cricket than there ever used to be.
Yeah, I feel like the hype around it early was nuts. And now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's maybe not as big as what it was. And now there's almost like this push back to test cricket to make test cricket great again. Is that what you're observing? Because I feel like Test cricket was dying, and I feel like there's almost a resurgence from what I've seen in some of the Australian tests and the Ashes, for example.
Yeah, I mean, Test cricket goes around in cycles. I mean, because the Ashes is played every 2 years. The other great series is, Australia, India. That's the other big one as well. So it fluctuates. This summer we've got Pakistan and the West Indies, who aren't great draw cards. So again, people will be talking about, oh yeah, Test cricket's on the way out. But then next year India will be here and it'll just, it'll sell out. Same with the year after as the Ashes. So it sort of goes around in cycles. But I think, there's a real push. I mean, Test cricket is the absolute ultimate, and it's a bit like playing tennis over 5 sets. Generally, the best player is going to win over 5 sets, whereas same as Test cricket, generally the better team's you're going to find out weaknesses over those 5 days out of the individual and out of the team. So T20 cricket, you can get away with a lot more because of the shorter nature of it. So all the weaknesses and that generally sometimes don't come to the fore. So it just depends on where, guys like Chris Lynn, who very early said, no, you know what, I don't want all the hassles of playing first-class cricket, and I know I can earn a decent living out of just playing T20 cricket. So now there's more choice, I think, for the individual cricketer about what they want to achieve out of the game. So really up until probably 5 or 6 years ago, everyone's ultimate was to play Test match cricket, but that's probably changed a little bit in recent times.
As a cricket purist and just being around the game and being in the culture for as long as you have, where do you sit with it all, and just people that you talk with all the time in terms of the whole 2020 movement, one-day movement, Test? Is it something that you really like? Is it something that you think is good for the game, or is it not good for the game? What are your thoughts?
I just think I love all formats of the game, but the amount of tournaments that are just popping up left, right, and centre is a real worry. Like, I think the ICC, which control the world game, has sort of lost control of fixturing. I mean, the fixturing is just out of control. I mean, that's the number one problem in cricket at the moment, and so the international teams are getting diluted because of these T20 competitions that pop up. Like, they're earning unbelievable amounts of money for 6 weeks' work. Like, we're talking, up to $1 million for 6 weeks' work. So, teams like the West Indies, who are naturally, T20 cricket's a little bit more like baseball. Like, the power 100%. Athletes are a little bit better at it. So they're getting lost. None of them want to play Test match cricket because they can earn great money and set themselves up for life by, doing other things. So that's the main problem in our game at the moment is the amount of T20 tournaments that are popping up.
Yeah, you can see the separation of people just doing it for the money or getting lost in I'm making so much money doing X here, so why would I worry about Y playing like test match cricket? Whereas like the people that love the game and love cricket, I think they would be probably tilting towards trying to make something out of Test cricket and representing their country in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we try and educate the younger player, like, all the kids growing up. Do you want to, that baggy green is so important, and play the ultimate form of the game, the hardest form of the game. That should be everyone's goal. And then along the way, everyone's got to assess, what they're good at. Are they going to play Test cricket? Are they going to play first-class cricket? Everyone's got their own decisions to make, but I think we've got to really try and, push people to play as much Test cricket as they can.
Is that the issue you're seeing with the younger generation? They're just completely wrapped up in the whole T20 buzz and that whole movement. That's like, nah, what's the point of Test cricket? Too long, can't be bothered.
But we're sort of hoping that, T20 cricket was formed because of attracting a younger, different sort of demographic to cricket. And then the idea was, okay, once you like T20 cricket, hopefully you're going to like 50 over cricket. And if you like 50 over cricket, hopefully you're going to like Test cricket. So that was the main aim of it. And then, so some people are just going to come into, some of the spectators might just like T20 cricket and they might not sort of like Test match cricket. But I don't know. The game might be very different in 20 years' time. Then, there's talk around about there might be only 4 or 5 nations that are actually only playing Test match cricket, whereas other countries like the West Indies and even South Africa, countries like that might not be playing Test match cricket because they can't afford it.
What do you mean can't afford it?
Well, their bodies can't afford, because it's all comes from television rights and that. If they're not attracting, figures, or television companies don't want to actually cover their games, then they're not going to have any money, pretty much. Because the crowds, they're not making much money from the crowds coming through the gates. It's all media rights.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So it could be dying art, and it's almost
Well, that's what a lot of people are saying. I mean, the IPL is just going through the roof. So I don't know whether you've seen the figures on IPL, but with the media rights, it's only second now per game, is only second now to the NFL in America per game.
Holy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's gone past the EPL, and it's only just under the NFL. So
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So the media rights, I can't remember what the last ones were, but yeah, per game. So they work it out per game.
Yeah.
And they're second to the NFL.
That is nuts.
As in cricket.
Yep.
Yeah, as in the Indian Premier League.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they're paying more for their media rights than what they are for the English Premier League.
Wow.
Per game.
Oh my God, okay. They're getting more viewership than the English
And now
Premier
they're saying that the players are actually in the IPL they're underpaid because of these rights. So they're going to play the IPL for, I think it goes for maybe 8 weeks, and the best players are probably getting around about $3 million or something like that. And they're saying they're underpaid.
That's hilarious. What more do you want?
Yeah.
These people are greedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's blown my mind. So being in the media, you've done a fair bit of commentary. What's it like being on the radio? So you touched on it earlier on. You're on Triple M, Rush Hour with Bernie and Jars. I've always wondered what goes on in a radio station. What goes on into a show? Like how much planning is involved? How do you come up with these segments? Is it scripted? How much is it off the cuff? Give us an insight.
I don't think we're a typical show, so you might be coming to the wrong people to try and get some advice about how to put a radio show together. But no, we put our radio show together so it sounds like 3 blokes at a bar having a beer, talking sport and talking other stuff as well. So
like the front bar on Channel 7.
A little bit, yeah. So it's more of when I first joined Triple M, I was thinking, it was going to be like a sports show, but we're probably maybe 40% sport and 60% sort of variety. But in terms of how do we put a show together, none of it's scripted. We're fortunate there's 3 of us, so there's not many times where one of us is stuck for words. So we really go off the reaction of the other 2. We're best mates, so that helps as well. I mean, they talk about, especially in radio, I mean, and to a certain degree on TV, it's all about the chemistry of who you're working for. We've got that in bucket loads. We've got great chemistry, so that's what hopefully shines through when you listen to the Rush Hour. But in terms of structuring a show, we've got a whiteboard, that sets out when we have a song, when we sort of read an ad. So we know how many segments we have to sort of fill. We've got a WhatsApp group that we share ideas all the time. So I'm sure you guys have got similar sort of groups that you chuck some ideas.
That's exactly what we have. Yeah,
exactly. So whenever we think of something or we're watching something or whatever, we always put it straight down on the WhatsApp group, or individually you put it in your phone. So most of the time, by the time we sort of get into work around about 2:30, we go live to air at 4. We've got a pretty good idea of what's on the show, like who the interviews are going to be, And then we might just have a couple of spots to fill, and we just chuck it around, and I'll go, yep, I've got something. But we never tell the others about what the segment's going to be. We'd rather like a natural sort of reaction. So very, very non-scripted. We like to be sort of more off the cuff.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's why you guys are really successful, and a lot of people like listening to you guys, is because it comes through really natural. It's easy to listen to. It feels like I'm just hanging out with my mates.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel too media personality like.
I think that's the great thing about, and I absolutely love our station, Triple M, is that the fact that no one takes themselves too seriously, and we don't want to be, we don't want to put the perfect show together, you know, like, and we don't mind people going out on a limb and trying to create something or making mistakes. Like, we love mistakes, and then, you know, we're able to sort of laugh about it and carry on it. That's half of our content, is all the bloopers.
And people love that as
yeah,
well.
that's right. It's just completely natural. So, you know, we're not trying to get every word right and all that sort of stuff. So I think that just comes across, and same as everyday conversations. Like, you know, you're going to stuff the odd word up here and there. We don't try and be, you know, absolutely perfect. So hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, a great example in the podcasting space is obviously the father of all of this is Joe Rogan, and how it's just like he doesn't have this massive team. He's got him and Jamie, and Jamie's always there and putting the content together, and Joe doesn't try to make it a big deal. He tries to keep a lid on it, and he just enjoys talking to people and finding out new perspectives and learning from different people. That he's never really tried to make it into this massive thing, and as a byproduct, just from starting it and going all this way, that he has made it a massive thing without even trying. I think there's parallels in a different way to you guys actually just enjoying it, not putting too much pressure, and just hanging out as mates.
It actually drives. We've got a young producer who does a great job, Tommy Basso, but it drives him crazy. Like, when we've got a couple of segments that aren't filled on the board when the show starts, he's like, oh, come on, we got to, and we're like, mate, don't worry about it. And sometimes
Don't worry about it, mate.
the red light will go on, and then we've got to come up with something, and someone will just say something, and then away we go. You know, so it's just and that's what we love about it. I honestly, genuinely feel very lucky that I go to work each day, and I can't wait to get in there, because we just have such a great time.
How good is that?
Yeah.
I think there's something to take away from, like, you talking about your young producer, of people just loosening up in that way, to be like, no, let me think of things on the fly here. Like, back me in, and like, we'll come up with it. Don't stress. Like, we've got some experience here. We know what we're doing. And I think people and a lot of people need too much structure, or too rigid, that they feel like they need every single spot filled and need to know exactly what they're going to say in every moment. It's not reality.
But some people are like that, aren't they? Like, some people are very driven by not routine, but they that's the way that they process things. It needs to be in a structured form, whereas I'm not really like that. I've never really been structured. So we keep him on edge, put it that way.
Good. Sounds like organized chaos.
It is.
How do you go with just the real short format of radio, in terms of like what we're doing here, long form, able to really just like settle in, dive into something a lot deeper? Do you kind of wish you could do that on radio? What's it like being really short form in that way? Yeah,
sometimes it can. If I'm being completely honest, it can be a little bit frustrating at times when you've got a great guest on and you sort of feel like you're just getting into it, or you've opened up something that they really want to talk about, and then you're looking at the segment timer, and like, our segments generally go for like 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, so short.
I know, so short. And
what are you doing 5 or 6 minutes?
Yeah, that's right. Try and cram as much in as you possibly can. But often we'll do it as a double break. So, you know, you turn it into like a 12-minute segment, but we've got to put a song in between. But yeah, I do like sort of delving in sometimes. It can get a little bit frustrating. Having said that, it does. Like, the 2 hours we do the show, because it's so fast moving, it just flies. Like, you know, you feel like you just started the show and then you finish. So, yeah.
Do you think there's a space in radio to almost blend and merge with like a podcast space, where you might have a guest and you actually have some sort of long form conversation, like you get some specific guest on to talk about something big, or it doesn't happen all the time, but maybe you have like a 30-minute chat? Or do you think there's scope, or do you guys have any power, or is any interest in going in that way at all?
Probably not for our show, and the way that our station sort of set up. Definitely with other stations, there's definitely that scope. There's no doubt about that. Just depends on, you know, where each station's at and what they want to do with their shows. But I know for a fact that we get told off for going too long. Like if we have someone on for 7 minutes instead of 6 minutes, we got the boss tapping us on our shoulder. Come on, keep things moving.
But do they look at the fact that like you guys might be lighting it up and like it's going great and so many people are loving it because you're just digging a little bit into something, maybe a little bit extra, a few minutes here and there? Do they look at it from that angle, or it has to be so tight? Everything has to be so tight all the time.
Well, as I said, like we can turn it into a double segment, but no real longer than that. So there's other times where we can interview someone outside of the show and then run it into the show. So you can sort of take the best bits. If you found some real gold or whatever, you can maybe do it that way as well. So you could interview someone for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then sort of, break it up or edit that interview into some of the segments maybe. Yeah.
It's interesting. I get really fascinated by this and understanding the landscape of like what you do and what we do, and then also like mainstream media, for example, because Dylan and I are obviously younger than you, and we're looking at, and we've grown up also in a different generation, and you can see the archaic nature of mainstream media starting to really die, and you don't really know if there's an actual future there. I think radio is different because everyone's driving in their car, everyone's still in a car all the time, and it's just whether they've got their own music on Bluetooth or just like their own podcast to listen to, or they actually commit to the radio. So do you feel that there is going to be a bit of a shift in mainstream media? How do mainstream media and maybe radio innovate to keep up with the times? Because I find myself, I don't watch TV, I just watch YouTube. I've got YouTube subscription, and I have my Netflix, and I like watching specific people, and I'm just not sure how these mainstream media and radio companies keep up. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, radio's shifted massively in the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of people, they do collect a lot of data and work out how a lot of listeners are going about consuming the product. So a lot of people still are actually listening to our radio show, but in podcast form. So they might, even with, I think the breakfast shows, they might be driving to work in the morning, but they're listening. They might be a day behind. They might be listening to the previous day, so they can, fast forward the ads or fast forward the songs or whatever. So,
okay, yeah, I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah, so with our show, you can, the podcast is available, I think, half an hour after our show finishes. So I think a lot of people listen to it like that as well. So they're not necessarily listening to it live in the car on the way home or whatever. They might be listening to it in the gym the next morning. So a lot of people are podcasting it that way.
Yeah, I didn't think about it like that from a streaming point of view, like through the website.
No, streaming's huge. Yeah. So we've got, with our company, we've got it's a listener app.
Yep.
And you can access all of so that's Southern Cross Oz Stereo. So all I don't know how many shows are on there, but there's thousands of podcasts. There's all the radio shows from around the country. They're all on this listener app. So it's a huge platform. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you can bypass ads.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you just fast forward. I often do that if I get home and I go, did Jars actually say that? And I get on the podcast and fast forward it to the segment that and listen to it that way. So you can, fast forward, rewind, do whatever you want. It's just like it's a pretty cool product.
Have you had any massive blunders or any just crack up moments that you can recall on the show?
Oh, heaps. There's too many to go back on, but probably my worst is in commentary, TV commentary. I was actually doing the IPL, the Indian Premier League, and a lot of the teams are either owned or they've got these huge Bollywood stars involved in their teams. And there were two Bollywood stars that are huge in India called Shilpa Shetty and Priti Zinta.
Yep.
Beautiful women. You know, they're on all the movies over there and they're huge. Anyway, I was commentating and I was sort of mid-sentence about saying something, and then one of the Bollywood stars came up on the screen, and I've got the producer in my ear saying, name her. And I'm like, and I'm going, and I've started to get a bit confused. I'm going, is that Priti Zinta or is that Shilpa Shetty? And I'm like, oh. And then he's going, name her. And I said, oh, look at her. There she is, enjoying the cricket, the beautiful Priti Shitty. Oh, so it wasn't Priti Zinta or Shilpa Shetty. I called her Pretty Shitty. And I was like, you know, it was one of those moments where, shit, did I just say that? And then I had people coming up to me afterwards going, you know, in 3 days' time going, oh, Blewett, those shoes are pretty shitty, mate. So, yeah, I haven't worked on the IPL since, so I don't know whether that's a coincidence or not.
Checks out. Oh, that's fantastic. All you can do is laugh. That's
that's
a great story. And do you see yourself working radio long term, loving it, no real end point?
Hopefully not. Like I'm probably about 3 or 4 years into my career with Triple M. So I'm sort of, I know I'm nearly 52, but in terms of like working for Triple M, I've worked sort of a little bit on and off, done bits and pieces for them in the past, but only about 3 years full time with Triple M. So yeah, hopefully not. We a fairly young show as well. Like Bernie, myself and Jars have only been together for a couple of years now. So and we've, you know, it's been a big success. So hopefully we can. It's whether we can sort of keep everyone together, I suppose. Radio's a funny sort of industry. People get, taken to different shows, or, the same company, but, someone might have to go and do breakfast for a few years or whatever. So it's about, we're hoping that we can really keep the show together for a long period of time. I don't know how long Jars wants to keep doing it. He's done radio for over 20 years. So whether he wants to keep doing it, I'm not too sure. I know he wants to go around for at least for another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm lucky as well. I work for Channel 7 during the summer, commentate the cricket with them. We've got the rights for another 7 years. Mm-hmm. So that if I don't stuff it up or call anyone pretty shitty, that'll get me through to nearly 60. So my boy, I think I've got to work till I'm about 70, I reckon, to get the boys through school. So I don't know, I've got to find ways of making a living.
Yeah. It's an enjoyable way to pass your time. Just hanging out with your mates, shooting the shit. Yeah, like you said, you just love going to work every day, and that's such a good spot. So if that's the case, then why have any end point? Just keep doing what you're doing and enjoying it, and just try to tweak things and make things a little bit better and see how you can improve things, but that's just enjoy that process. Yeah,
that's right. As I said, I'm very lucky. I'm really busy for 2 or 3 months during the summer where I'm, the show breaks for 6 weeks with the rush hour, but I'm, straight into the cricket commentary with both Triple M and Channel 7. So I'm flat out for like 2 or 3 months, but excuse me. But for the rest of the year, it gives me a great chance to sort of refresh and get ready for the summer again. I've got when I said I'm trying to be less selfish, I'm around my boys a lot more than I was with my older daughter. So I'm really enjoying that, taking my boys to school and doing all the stuff with them on the weekends is great. So at the moment, I've got a great sort of, work-life balance.
Amazing. You said like a number of times in this conversation that like fortunate, very lucky, things go my way. I think there's an element in luck in life, but why do you think so many good things have just come your way quite easily, naturally? Do you put that down to something more than just being fortunate and being lucky?
I don't know whether that's I don't know, other people might be able to answer that question better than I can, but I just distinctly remember my mum, my late mother, always saying to me, doesn't matter what you do, Greg, you always land on your feet somehow, you know? So I've never really been one to be, and it drives my wife crazy, you know, she doesn't think I'm ambitious enough, but, you know, I certainly look forward and sort of think about where my life's going to be in 5 years' time, but I don't sort of get much further than that. It's, more about sort of taking the opportunities at the time and doing things that I like doing. And I've, loved my cricket career and I've loved my media career. So I haven't really had to sort of alter the course of my life other than that too much. So that's why I think I'm quite lucky, is that I've been able to do things that I'm good at and I really like.
Is it just saying yes to the opportunities that present themselves that you enjoy rather than getting scared? Have you been someone
I've said no to a lot of things.
Do you think it's because you've said yes to the right things and said no to the wrong things and holding true to that you've maybe had a better pathway that you've been able to enjoy more success and just had a good time? Yeah,
I've been I think there's definitely a place in life where you've got to take yourself outside of your comfort zone, and I've done that a lot throughout my life, so don't get me wrong, but I've also been you're right, said yes to things that I know that I'm going to enjoy doing, and other things that I've been asked to do where I think, oh, you know what, that's not really my thing, or it's not a great fit for me at this time in my life. And that's maybe where I'm at the moment, enjoying what I'm doing and doing something that I really like doing.
Yeah, I think you underestimate how many people struggle with that. I think people get so wrapped up in just saying yes to the wrong things because of maybe looking at it too much from a financial element. And obviously, like, finances are so important and you need to set yourself up. But I think people get paralyzed and make poor decisions because of that. And it's no real easy answer, and that's a challenging one.
I know. And there's all, as you know, there'd be, completely different individual situations along the way where, you might have to take a job for a certain period of time, or there might be a certain situation where you can be courageous enough to say, you know what, it is good money, but something I might not like doing, taking less money and then growing that into something that you love doing and earning more. Who knows? Like, everyone's in different situations, but that's everyone's own sort of
and it'd be so
path,
and so easy to get sucked in.
Yeah.
Once you are making good money doing something that maybe isn't right, and then you're like, oh, I just can't turn down the money, even though I know this is not the right thing for me. And then you're 20 years later miserable with all this money, and it's like, was this maybe the right path? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
To kind of move this conversation towards an end, I want to touch on being a dad for you. Just some of the lessons you've learned from cricket. What have you really learned along your journey of cricket? Other things, everything you've done in your life, and what sort of things and values do you want to instill in your boys, or try to instill in your boys to help them on their journey, and also your daughter as well, who's a little bit older?
Well, the main thing for me is manners. That's the most important thing for me and my kids. And one of the great joys in my life at the moment is my daughter, who's 22 years of age. But I've been getting it for a fair period of time now. The feedback is, she's such a great young lady. She's so well mannered. She holds a great conversation. I just gush when I hear that sort of thing. So, same with my boys. I'm done sort of now getting to the situation where the manners are coming a bit more naturally, which is what you want. But again, I just want them to be, one, obviously health is the main thing. So if they're, lucky enough to be healthy, touch wood, all three kids have been so far, well-mannered, and then just to be able to find something that they're good at, and whether that's sport or work, charity, whatever it is, I'm big on that. Just because I played sport or just because I played cricket, not necessarily that's the reason why I want my kids to do that. I want them to find their own thing that they're, equally good at or better at, whether that's, cricket, sport, work-wise. That's the main thing for me. It's a bit of a cliche sort of thing, but I just want my kids to be happy and good people.
Yeah, respect. How do you manage the whole new landscape that they're in compared to how you grew up? I mean, you didn't grow up with technology, you didn't grow up with phones, social media. So how do you navigate this new landscape? Because I feel like a lot of parents just don't know how to navigate and where to kind of lay boundaries on certain things with technology and social media. So how do you navigate that with the boys, especially at their age?
Got any advice? Because we're struggling with that at the moment, to be honest. I mean, when you mention YouTube, our 8-year-old Sam he's just on YouTube constantly. So the other one, Rory, who's 7, he's a lot better, but he does follow his brother a little bit. I think the young one's a little bit more like me. Like he'd prefer to kick the footy around or be on his bike, whereas Sam's a bit more stuck on the laptop or searching things on, he's just everywhere, isn't it? I mean, the smart TVs, like go watch TV and you go in there and he's on YouTube or we've tried to be as old fashioned as we can be. So the boys haven't got iPads. Recently they got a Nintendo, but they're only allowed 20 minutes a day on that. So we're just trying to limit their screen time as much as possible, but it's hard, mate.
Yeah.
We fight it every day.
Yeah.
We do. So
I think you got to hold firm and be prepared to fight with them on that and just stick to your guns. I mean, obviously I don't have any experience there, but just doing that and then creating, because I've spoken to other people and they've just said, like, once they're outside and they're doing other things and not on that, they're having the best time ever. But getting them outside to do some of these things is the hardest thing ever. And the battle and the arguments they have around it is full on. But then they appreciate the fact that once they are outside, they're having a good time. It's just laying those foundations.
Well, fortunately, we're not in that situation yet. Like generally, as I said, Sam's the one who's probably more into that sort of stuff. But if I say to him, Sam, come on, mate, let's go outside or ride your bike, he'll pretty much get up straight away and come out. So we haven't had too many fights about that sort of stuff yet. So that might be coming. Who knows?
Yeah, keep us updated. We'll have to do our bit with the boys at ATA to make sure that they're getting outside and not on technology, because we talk about it all the time. We're just like kids in the holidays when we don't see them, like, get out here, use the courts, get out and play, hang out with your friends, like get off the phone and the iPad and get out and do stuff.
No, we're big like that, and we've tried to make a conscious effort to be as much like that as possible. But it's not easy when they come home from school and all their mates have got this, and there's always little challenges along the way, but we're trying. That's all I can say.
That's all you can do, really. Last question here. Do you have any advice for anyone listening trying to become a pro in whatever sport or whatever discipline they're doing from your journey? Is there any kind of key things that you look back on or would give advice to help anyone on that journey for themselves? Yeah,
I reckon if you're going to have a crack, have a proper crack at it. Like, do your research, it's great to have role models as well. Like I grew up, Greg Chappell, Lily, those sort of guys. So it's not necessarily model your game around, but sort of it's always good to have heroes. And then, as I said, if you're going to have a real go at it, have a go at it, but I don't think get so deep into it where it's like just proving to be an unwinnable battle. I think you've still got to have something. You've got to have a life balance there, whether that's a second sport, whether it's study, whether it's working with it. I don't know. There's got to be something else, like there's a difference between like going all in and having a crack, which is what I'm saying, but you've also got to have times where you can not be so consumed by it that you've got to have something outside that's not normal, but takes you away from what you're trying to achieve.
I think if you have that,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because then you can actually direct your energy more clearly once you are committing and having a full crack, like you said. and it doesn't consume you, because then you completely define yourself on the performance of how you're doing in that sport, because you're basically saying to yourself, well, I gave everything up for this and it's not working, and then there's so much pressure involved. So yeah, I think that's really good advice. Thanks so much.
No
It's
worries.
been absolute pleasure. We've been keen to do this for a little while, and appreciate you taking time, because we know you're a busy man. So absolutely loved today, and thanks again, Greg.
No worries. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.